Marcus Taylor stared at the millionaire standing in his doorway, a check for $2 million extended toward him. Yesterday, he was just a hungry black-line cook who gave away his meal. Today, his life was transformed. But the price would be higher than anyone imagined. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story about sacrifice opportunity and standing up for what's right, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready to discover how a simple act of kindness turned into a battle for an entire community's future. What would you do if someone offered you everything you'd ever wanted, but at a cost you weren't sure you could pay? The alarm blared at 4:30 in the morning, and Marcus Taylor groaned as he rolled over to silence it. His small bedroom in the back of his grandmother's house was already warm, the ancient window unit struggling against the Alabama summer heat. At 18, Marcus should have been enjoying his summer after graduation, but instead he was about to start another 12-hour shift at Southern Comfort, a diner on the outskirts of Montgomery, where he worked as a line cook. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he made his way to the bathroom, careful not to wake his grandmother Eloise, who needed her rest. At 73, her arthritis was getting worse, and the medication she needed kept getting more expensive. The mirror reflected dark circles under his eyes as he splashed water on his face. Outside the bathroom window, he could see the deteriorating landscape of Pinewood Gardens, their neighborhood that had been systematically neglected for decades. Potholes large enough to swallow car tires lined the streets. Streetlights remained broken for months at a time, and the heavy police presence never seemed to result in actual protection for residents. Marcus pulled on his work uniform, a pair of black pants with a small hole in the knee that he'd carefully mended, and a white shirt that he kept meticulously clean despite the challenges. The kitchen at Southern Comfort would be hot and busy, but the job paid slightly above minimum wage, and every dollar counted. He checked on his grandmother before leaving, making sure her medication was within reach on the nightstand along with a glass of water. "I love you, Grandma," he whispered, though she continued to sleep. The walk to work would take nearly an hour. The city had canceled the bus route through Pinewood Gardens 2 years ago, claiming budget cuts, though the routes through the white neighborhoods remained untouched. Marcus had once calculated that he walked over 3,000 miles a year just commuting to and from work. The streets were quiet this early, with only the occasional police car cruising by slowly, the officer inside always watching him with suspicion. Marcus kept his head down and maintained a steady pace. He'd learned long ago that running, even if just to catch a bus or because you were late for work, could be dangerous for a young black man. The first light of dawn was breaking as he arrived at Southern Comfort. He slipped in through the back entrance where Harold, the morning dishwasher, was already loading the machine. "Morning, Marcus," Harold said with a nod. At 65, Harold had been working at the diner for over 20 years and had taken Marcus under his wing when he started. Marcus tied his apron and got to work prepping for the breakfast rush. The kitchen was his domain, a place where he could lose himself in the rhythm of cooking. By 6:30, the first customers were arriving, and the orders began coming in. Ronald Kessler, the 50-something white manager, poked his head into the kitchen just as Marcus was plating a perfect stack of blueberry pancakes. "Taylor," he barked, "that order for Table 7 is taking too long." Marcus bit back a response. Table 7's order had come in 3 minutes ago, and pancakes took time. Meanwhile, Jimmy, the white-line cook who worked the afternoon shift regularly, fell behind on orders with no comment from Ronald. "Yes, sir," was all he said, focusing on getting the food out perfectly. By mid-morning, the rush had died down, and Marcus took a moment to drink some water. Through the service window, he could see the dining room, where a familiar, elderly white couple was being seated. They were regulars who always made a point of requesting a white server. Once, when Shanice, the only black waitress, had approached their table, the woman had loudly asked, "Can't we get one of the other girls, Mr. Peterson?" The 60-year-old owner had quickly intervened, apologizing to the couple and assigning them a different server. When Shanice had complained, he'd simply said, "We can't afford to lose customers. Just let it go." Marcus watched as Shanice now carefully avoided their table, her face, a practiced mask that hid the hurt. She was 19, working to save money for nursing school, and one of the few people at Southern Comfort who Marcus considered a friend. During his break, they often shared their dreams. One day she'd tell him, "I'll be working at a hospital, making real money helping people. No more of these racist customers looking at me like I'm dirt." Marcus would nod and share his own plans for taking business courses at the community college. He'd already been saving for a year and almost had enough for one semester's tuition. The lunch rush began, and Marcus fell back into his routine. The kitchen temperature rose to nearly 100 degrees, sweat dripping down his back as he worked the grill. A customer complained that their burger was overcooked, though Marcus knew it was perfect. Another requested to see who's cooking back there and frowned when Marcus came to the pass. "I thought so," the man muttered loud enough for Marcus to hear. "These people don't know how to cook proper American food." The comment stung, but Marcus had heard worse. He returned to his station and continued working. The day dragged on, and by the time his shift was ending, Marcus's feet ached and his back was tight with tension. He was wiping down his station when Ronald appeared again. "Taylor, where were you 20 minutes ago?" Marcus looked up, confused. "I was in the storage room fixing the shelf that collapsed yesterday. Mr. Peterson asked me to take care of it." Ronald's eyes narrowed. "Really? Because $20 went missing from the register while Kelly was on break." The implication was clear, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. "I was in the storage room the whole time," he repeated, keeping his voice even, despite the anger and hurt bubbling up inside. "You can ask Mr. Peterson." Ronald stared at him for a long moment before saying, "I'll be checking the cameras, and if I find out you're lying." He left the threat hanging in the air as he walked away. Marcus finished cleaning in silence. The joy he usually found in the kitchen completely evaporated. As he untied his apron, Shauna stopped by. "Don't let him get to you," she said quietly. "We both know you'd never steal." Marcus nodded, grateful for her support, but too tired and hungry to respond with more than a weak smile. It was nearly 8 o'clock in the evening by the time he clocked out, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders as he prepared for the long walk home. One of the few benefits of working at Southern Comfort was the staff meal policy. At the end of each shift, employees were allowed to take home one meal of their choosing. For Marcus, this wasn't just a perk, it was often his main source of food for the day. With his grandmother's limited Social Security barely covering their rent and medications, food was a luxury they rationed carefully. Tonight he had packed a hearty chicken dinner with mashed potatoes and green beans, enough to share with his grandmother when he got home. The container was warm against his chest as he tucked it inside his jacket to protect it from the light rain that had started to fall. The streets were dark, many of the streetlights in Pinewood Gardens permanently out of service. Marcus hunched his shoulders against the rain and quickened his pace, eager to get home. As he rounded the corner near the edge of downtown, he noticed an elderly couple huddled under the small awning of a closed shop. The man had his arm around the woman, both of them drenched and looking lost. Marcus hesitated. Past experience had taught him that approaching elderly white people, especially at night, could be dangerous. He remembered vividly the time when he was 16 and had offered to help Mrs. Lenhart, an elderly woman from the neighborhood adjacent to Pinewood Gardens, carry her groceries. She had screamed for help, and within minutes, 2 police cars had arrived, officers drawing their weapons as they ordered Marcus to the ground. It had taken Mr. Washington, the community center director, who happened to be passing by, to convince them that Marcus was just trying to be helpful. The memory still made his heart race, but something about the couple's distress made him pause. They looked genuinely frightened and vulnerable, the woman shivering visibly in her soaked cardigan. Taking a deep breath, Marcus approached slowly, making sure they saw him coming. "Excuse me," he called out gently, stopping a respectful distance away. "Are you folks okay? Do you need help?" The couple turned to him, and Marcus could see the immediate wariness in their eyes. The man pulled his wife slightly closer. "We're fine, young man," he said stiffly, though his voice wavered. The woman whispered something to her husband, and his expression changed slightly. "Actually," he admitted reluctantly, "we seem to be a bit lost. Our car broke down a few blocks away, and we were trying to find a hotel or somewhere to call our son." Marcus nodded, still keeping his distance. "The rain's coming down pretty hard." Southern Comfort Diner is about 5 blocks that way, he said, pointing. They're still open. You could call from there and get out of this weather. The woman looked at her husband pleadingly. Gerald, I'm freezing, and we haven't eaten since breakfast. The mention of food made Marcus's own stomach growl, reminding him of the meal tucked inside his jacket. The couple hesitated clearly, weighing their options. I work at Southern Comfort, Marcus added. I can show you the way if you'd like. After a moment's consideration, they agreed, and Marcus led them through the rain, occasionally checking back to make sure they were keeping up. The woman was moving slowly, her shoes clearly not made for walking, and Marcus slowed his pace to accommodate them. When they finally reached the diner, Marcus held the door open for them. The warmth of the restaurant enveloped them as they entered, and Marcus noticed how the hostess's expression shifted from professional welcome to surprise as she connected Marcus with the elderly white couple. Table for 2, she asked pointedly, excluding Marcus from the count. Yes, thank you, the man said, not correcting her assumption. Marcus was about to leave when the woman turned to him. Thank you for your help, young man. We appreciate it. There was genuine gratitude in her voice, but also something else, a hint of surprise, as if she hadn't expected kindness from someone like him. Marcus nodded. No problem. Hope you folks get everything sorted out. He was turning to leave when he heard the man say quietly to his wife, I just realized I don't have my wallet. Margaret, do you have yours? The woman's face fell as she searched her handbag. No, it must be in the car. We don't have any money for food. Marcus felt his own meal still warm against his chest. He was hungry, had been hungry all day, and his grandmother was waiting at home, probably hungry too. But something about the couple's distress, the woman's shivering form, moved him. Before he could overthink it, Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out the container. Here, he said, placing it on their table. It's a chicken dinner. Not fancy restaurant food, but it's hot, and there's enough for both of you. The couple stared at him in shock. We couldn't possibly, the man began, but Marcus cut him off gently. Please take it. I insist. You need it more than I do right now. The woman, Margaret, looked at the container and then back at Marcus. Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us. Marcus shrugged. Because it's the right thing to do. And maybe someone will do the same for me someday when I need it. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That's very generous of you. Her hesitation before the word generous was slight but noticeable. What's your name, young man? The man asked, his tone softer now. Marcus. Marcus Taylor. Well, Marcus Taylor, the man said, extending his hand. I'm Gerald, and this is my wife, Margaret. Thank you for your kindness. Marcus shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the expensive watch partially hidden under Gerald's sleeve. As Marcus turned to leave, he heard Margaret whisper to her husband, I didn't expect someone like him to be so generous. It's really quite surprising. The words stung, but Marcus kept walking, pushing through the door back into the rain. His stomach growled loudly as he began the long walk home. The rain had intensified, soaking through his thin jacket within minutes. The streets were emptier now, and Marcus kept a watchful eye on his surroundings. Pinewood Gardens was not a safe place after dark. Twice he had to duck into shadows to avoid groups of young men he didn't recognize, and once he crossed the street to avoid a slow-moving police car. By the time he reached his grandmother's house, he was drenched and shivering, his empty stomach cramping with hunger. The lights were still on, which meant his grandmother was waiting up for him despite her need for rest. That you, Marcus, she called, as he entered, her voice thin with age but still strong with determination. Yes, Grandma, it's me, he replied, trying to keep the exhaustion from his voice. Eloise Taylor sat in her worn armchair, a crocheted blanket across her lap. Her eyes, sharp despite her 73 years, immediately took in his wet clothes and the absence of the food container he usually brought home. What happened to our dinner, she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew he had given it away. Marcus sighed and told her about the elderly couple, about their predicament, and his decision to give them his meal. When he finished, Eloise was quiet for a long moment. You've got a good heart just like your mama did, she finally said, but she always said your good heart would get you in trouble someday. Marcus sat beside her chair, taking her gnarled hand in his. I'm sorry about dinner, Grandma. I'll make us some rice. Eloise squeezed his hand. Don't you worry about me. I had some crackers earlier, but you need to eat something after working all day." The rice was one of the few items left in their pantry, and as Marcus prepared it, he thought about the couple and wondered if they were enjoying the chicken dinner he had given them. He wondered if they had found their son, if they were now warm and safe in a hotel somewhere. He wondered if they would remember him tomorrow, or if he was just another nameless black face they would forget as soon as they returned to their normal lives. As he and his grandmother ate their plain rice at the small kitchen table, Marcus felt the weight of his sacrifice. He had done the right thing, he believed that, but the right thing had left both him and his grandmother hungrier than they should be. Tomorrow would be another early morning, another long walk, another day of hard work and casual racism. And tomorrow, like today, and all the days before, he would endure it with dignity and determination, holding on to the dream of a better future. The persistent knocking pulled Marcus from a deep sleep. He blinked, disoriented, as sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of his bedroom window. The knocking continued firm and rhythmic. For a moment, panic seized him. They were 3 months behind on rent, and despite the payment plan Marcus had negotiated with their landlord, the threat of eviction loomed constantly. Marcus, his grandmother, called from the living room, her voice tight with worry. "Someone's at the door." Marcus threw on a t-shirt and jeans, running a quick hand over his short hair as he hurried to the front door. Through the peephole, he could see a well-dressed black man in a tailored suit, holding a leather briefcase. Not the sheriff, or their landlord at least. With cautious relief, Marcus opened the door. "Marcus Taylor," the man asked, his voice deep and professional. When Marcus nodded, the man extended his hand. "My name is Lawrence Wilson. I'm an attorney with Wilson and Associates. May I come in? I have a matter of great importance to discuss with you." Marcus hesitated, looking back at his grandmother, who had risen from her chair and stood watching with suspicion. Strangers in nice suits rarely brought good news to homes in Pinewood Gardens. "What's this about?" Marcus asked, not moving from the doorway. Lawrence Wilson smiled slightly. "It concerns Gerald and Margaret Carmichael, the couple you assisted yesterday evening. They asked me to come speak with you." Marcus's eyebrows rose in surprise. "The couple from the diner? How did you know where I live? May I come in, Mr. Taylor? I assure you this is to your benefit." After another moment's hesitation, Marcus stepped aside, allowing the attorney to enter their small living room. Eloise Taylor stood rigid, her eyes narrowed as she assessed the visitor. "Grandma, this is Mr. Wilson. He's here about the couple I helped yesterday." Lawrence Wilson nodded respectfully to Eloise. "Mrs. Taylor, it's a pleasure to meet you. I apologize for arriving unannounced." He gestured to the couch. "May I?" Eloise nodded stiffly, returning to her armchair while Marcus perched on its arm, protective and alert. Lawrence sat on the edge of the worn couch and opened his briefcase. "Mr. Taylor, the couple you assisted yesterday evening weren't ordinary people in distress. They were Gerald and Margaret Carmichael." He paused, as if the names should mean something. When Marcus showed no recognition, Lawrence continued. "Gerald Carmichael is the founder and CEO of Carmichael Industries, one of the largest private investment firms in the Southeast. He and his wife are worth approximately $300 million. Marcus stared in disbelief. "You're saying those old people I gave my dinner to are millionaires?" Lawrence nodded. "Multimillionaires, in fact. And they were never stranded, nor did they lose their wallets. For the past 6 months, the Carmichaels have been conducting what they call character tests in communities throughout Montgomery." Marcus felt his face grow hot with indignation. "Character tests? You mean they were pretending to be in trouble? Why would rich people do something like that?" Lawrence withdrew several documents from his briefcase. "The Carmichaels believe that true character is revealed when people think no one is watching, when there's nothing to gain from kindness. They've been identifying individuals who demonstrate exceptional character despite challenging circumstances. So they play games with people who are already struggling." Eloise interjected, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Sounds like rich folks with too much time on their hands." Lawrence didn't disagree. "What matters is that your actions yesterday made a profound impression on them, Mr. Taylor. The Carmichaels were deeply moved by your selflessness, especially when they learned from the diner staff about your circumstances and how you walk miles to work each day." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The idea of strangers discussing his personal situation made him uneasy. "So what does this have to do with you being here?" Lawrence handed Marcus a business card embossed with Wilson and Associates Legal Counsel in elegant script, along with several newspaper clippings featuring photos of the elderly couple at charity galas. "The Carmichaels have instructed me to make you an offer. They want to provide you with a full scholarship to Birmingham Business School, one of the most prestigious in the state, along with a $50,000 stipend for living expenses." Marcus nearly dropped the papers he was holding. $50,000. A full scholarship. This has to be some kind of scam. Lawrence shook his head. "I assure you this is legitimate. The Carmichaels operate the Carmichael Foundation, which provides educational opportunities to promising young people. They believe you have exceptional potential and want to invest in your future." Marcus looked to his grandmother, whose expression remained skeptical. "What's the catch?" she asked, voicing the question in Marcus's mind. "There must be something they want in return." "The foundation asks only that recipients maintain good academic standing and consider returning to their communities after graduation to help others. There are no legal obligations beyond that." The offer seemed too good to be true, which in Marcus's experience meant it probably was. "I need time to think about this," he said finally. Lawrence nodded and retrieved more documents from his briefcase. "Of course. Here's information about the foundation and the scholarship program. I've also included my contact information. The Carmichaels would like to meet with you tomorrow at their foundation offices to discuss the details in person." After Lawrence left, Marcus sat on the couch staring at the documents in his hands. The scholarship offer looked legitimate with the university's letterhead and official seals. "What do you think, Grandma?" he asked finally. Eloise pursed her lips. "I think when something looks too good to be true, it usually is, especially when it's white folks suddenly wanting to help black folks out of nowhere." Before Marcus could respond, there was another knock at the door. This time it was Deshawn, his childhood friend, who lived 2 houses down. "Saw a fancy car parked outside earlier," Deshawn said, dropping onto the couch beside Marcus. "What's going on?" Marcus explained the situation, while Deshawn listened with growing skepticism. "Man, you need to be careful," Deshawn warned when Marcus finished. "Remember when those urban development people came through promising jobs if people would sell their houses cheap? Half the neighborhood got displaced, and those jobs never materialized." Marcus did remember. Pinewood Gardens had a long history of exploitation by wealthy outside interests. "But this is different," he argued, though uncertainty colored his voice. "This is about education, not property. To rich white folks, everything's about property," eventually Deshawn countered. "Just watch yourself." Later that afternoon, Marcus called the number on Lawrence Wilson's card, half expecting it to be disconnected. Instead, a professional receptionist answered Wilson and Associates. "How may I direct your call?" When Marcus asked to speak with Lawrence Wilson, he was put through immediately. "Mr. Taylor, I'm glad you called. Have you had a chance to review the materials?" "Yes, but I'm still not sure this is real," Marcus admitted. "I understand your skepticism," Lawrence replied. "In your position, I would feel the same way. Would it help if we scheduled the meeting at a public location of your choosing rather than at the foundation offices?" The offer reassured Marcus somewhat. A scammer wouldn't be so accommodating. "No, that's okay. I'll come to the foundation tomorrow, but I'm bringing my grandmother with me." "Of course. Shall we say 10 o'clock? The address is in the materials I left with you." After hanging up, Marcus spent hours researching the Carmichaels online at the community center's computer lab. Gerald Carmichael appeared in numerous articles about business success and philanthropy. The Carmichael Foundation's website showcased smiling scholarship recipients and community projects. But as Marcus dug deeper, he found older articles detailing controversies, allegations of predatory business practices, disputes with former employees, and questions about the foundation's selection processes. What troubled Marcus most was a pattern he noticed in the foundation's activities. They seemed to focus on areas just before major development projects were announced. Was this scholarship offer truly about his potential, or was there something else at play? As Marcus walked home, turning possibilities over in his mind, he couldn't help wondering, what would you do if someone offered you everything you'd ever dreamed of, but your instincts told you there might be hidden motives? Would you grab the opportunity despite your reservations, or would you walk away? Comment number 1, if you would accept the offer immediately. Number 2, if you'd be cautious like Marcus. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this story about how a simple act of kindness led to an unexpected dilemma. What do you think the Carmichaels really want from Marcus? Is this genuinely a case of wealthy philanthropists paying forward an act of kindness? Or is something more calculating happening beneath the surface? The Carmichael Foundation headquarters stood in stark contrast to Pinewood Gardens. Located in the wealthiest part of Montgomery, the 6-story glass building gleamed in the morning sunlight, its manicured grounds patrolled by private security. Marcus helped his grandmother from the bus they had taken across town, conscious of how out of place they looked in this neighborhood. His best button-up shirt and cleanest jeans felt woefully inadequate among the suits and designer dresses worn by people entering the building. As they approached the entrance, Marcus noticed a security guard watching them intently, speaking quietly into a radio. "Just keep your head up," Eloise murmured, sensing Marcus's discomfort. "We have an appointment. We have every right to be here." The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a reception desk staffed by an immaculately dressed white woman. As Marcus and Eloise approached, her professional smile faltered slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting they might be lost. "We have an appointment with Lawrence Wilson," Marcus explained. "I'm Marcus Taylor." The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're the scholarship candidate, I see." She picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it before addressing them again. "Please have a seat. Someone will be down for you shortly." They sat on a sleek leather sofa that probably cost more than everything in their home combined. Marcus noticed several security guards had positioned themselves nearby, watching them casually but persistently. After 15 minutes of uncomfortable waiting, during which several white visitors were escorted upstairs, immediately after checking in, an elevator opened and Lawrence Wilson emerged. "Mr. Taylor, Mrs. Taylor," he greeted them warmly. "I apologize for the wait. Please come with me." As they followed him to the elevator, Marcus caught the receptionist staring at them. "Delivery entrance is around back," she called out, assuming they were leaving. "They're not leaving," Diane Lawrence corrected her firmly. "They're my guests for a meeting with the Carmichaels." The receptionist's face flushed with embarrassment, but Marcus noticed she didn't apologize. The elevator carried them to the top floor, where Lawrence led them down a hallway lined with photographs of smiling black and brown students in graduation gowns, each bearing a small plaque with a name and year. "Former scholarship recipients," Lawrence explained. "The Carmichael Foundation has been providing educational opportunities for 20 years. He stopped before a set of double doors and knocked once before opening them. "Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael, may I present Marcus Taylor and his grandmother Eloise Taylor." The boardroom was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. At the far end of a gleaming conference table sat the elderly couple from the diner, now transformed by expensive clothing and an air of unmistakable authority. Gerald Carmichael rose from his chair, his posture straight despite his age. "Marcus Taylor," he said, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you properly." Margaret Carmichael remained seated but offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Taylor, thank you for coming as well." Marcus shook Gerald's hand, noting the same firm grip from the diner, but now understanding the confidence behind it. "Please sit down," Gerald gestured to chairs at the opposite end of the long table, creating a distance that felt deliberate. When they were seated, Gerald steepled his fingers and regarded Marcus with an evaluating gaze. "Lawrence has explained our offer, I presume, a full scholarship to Birmingham Business School and a generous stipend to cover your living expenses." Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. It's very generous. But I'm still not clear on why you're doing this." Gerald chuckled. "Young man, in my 76 years on this earth, I've learned that character is the true measure of a person. When you gave us your meal, not knowing who we were, expecting nothing in return, you demonstrated exceptional character." His tone turned condescending as he added, "You're a credit to your people, Marcus. With the right education and guidance, you could go far." The phrase sent a chill through Marcus. "My people?" he questioned, keeping his voice even. Gerald waved a dismissive hand. "You know what I mean. Young people from challenging backgrounds. the ones with the drive to rise above their circumstances. Margaret leaned forward slightly. What my husband means is that we see potential in you, Marcus, the kind of potential that deserves nurturing. Lawrence cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the specifics of the scholarship program. For the next hour, Lawrence outlined the details while Marcus listened carefully, asking questions about requirements and expectations. The scholarship would cover full tuition, books, and housing at Birmingham Business School. The stipend would provide $25,000 annually for 2 years. In return, Marcus would be expected to maintain a 3.5 GPA and participate in foundation events as a success story. We'd also like you to consider an internship at Carmichael Industries after your first year, Gerald added, with potential for full-time employment after graduation. The offer was becoming clearer now, and Marcus felt increasing unease. Which reminds me, Gerald continued, we'll need to discuss your housing situation. Birmingham is quite a distance from Montgomery. You wouldn't be able to commute. I'd have to leave Pinewood Gardens, Marcus asked, glancing at his grandmother. I can't leave my grandmother alone. Gerald and Margaret exchanged looks. We anticipated that concern, Margaret said smoothly. The foundation could arrange for your grandmother to relocate to a senior living community near the university. All expenses paid, of course. Eloise stiffened beside Marcus. I've lived in my house for 40 years, she said firmly. I'm not moving to some facility for old people. An awkward silence followed before Gerald spoke again. Well, these are details we can work out. For now, let's take a tour of the foundation. I'd like to show you what we do here. The tour felt more like a parade, with Marcus and Eloise being introduced to various executives and staff members. Marcus couldn't help noticing how he was presented. This is Marcus, our newest prospect. He works as a line cook, but has tremendous potential. Each introduction felt more demeaning than the last, reducing him to a charity case rather than a student with genuine academic aspirations. During a moment when Gerald was speaking with another executive, Margaret engaged Eloise in conversation. Your grandson is quite articulate, she commented, not at all like others from that neighborhood. You must have raised him with strong values. Eloise's expression remained carefully neutral. My grandson speaks well because he's intelligent and educated, Mrs. Carmichael, just like many others from our neighborhood would be if they had equal opportunities. Margaret seemed taken aback by the response, but quickly recovered. Of course. That's exactly what our foundation aims to provide. As they continued the tour, Marcus overheard a conversation between Gerald and another executive that made him freeze. The Pinewood acquisition is progressing, the man was saying quietly. We should have enough properties under contract by the end of the quarter to proceed with Phase 1. Gerald noticed Marcus listening and quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. When they returned to the boardroom, Gerald presented Marcus with a thick document. This is our preliminary agreement, he explained. Essentially, it outlines the scholarship terms and commits you to considering employment with Carmichael Industries after graduation. Nothing binding yet, just an indication of serious interest on both sides. Marcus took the document, his mind racing. I'd like to review this carefully before signing anything. Gerald's smile tightened slightly. Of course, but we do need a decision soon. The academic year begins in 6 weeks, and there's much to arrange. He slid an expensive pen across the table. Perhaps you could at least sign the intent to proceed. Just the last page. Marcus looked at the pen, then at his grandmother, whose subtle headshake confirmed his own instincts. I appreciate everything you've shown us today, Mr. Carmichael, but I need time to consider all aspects of this opportunity. I'll review the agreement and get back to you through Mr. Wilson. Gerald's expression hardened momentarily before he recovered his philanthropist's smile. Youth and caution. Admirable qualities if sometimes unnecessary. Very well, take the agreement home. But remember, opportunities like this don't come along every day, especially for someone from your background. As Lawrence escorted them back to the lobby, Marcus's mind was filled with questions and doubts. The scholarship was real, the money substantial, but the Carmichaels' attitudes and that overheard conversation about Pinewood acquisition suggested there might be more to their interest than simple charity. Outside the building, Lawrence hailed a taxi for them, insisting on paying the fare back to Pinewood Gardens. As they settled into the back seat, Eloise took Marcus's hand. "What are you thinking, grandson?" she asked quietly. Marcus stared out the window at the gleaming Carmichael Foundation building. "I'm thinking we need to find out exactly what the Carmichaels want with Pinewood Gardens," he replied, "and what they really want from me." The community center in Pinewood Gardens was one of the few spaces where residents could gather freely. Built in the 1970s and maintained through countless bake sales and community fundraisers, its worn walls had witnessed generations of meetings, celebrations, and strategic planning sessions. Today, it hosted an impromptu gathering of Marcus's closest advisors, his grandmother Eloise, his friend Deshawn, his co-worker Shanice, and Mr. Washington, the center's director, who had known Marcus since he was a child. The Carmichael Foundation Agreement sat in the center of the folding table, its legal language and corporate letterhead seeming out of place among the community center's modest furnishings. "Full scholarship, $50,000 stipend housing for both of you," Deshawn summarized, whistling low. "That's life-changing money, Marcus." Shanice nodded in agreement. "You've always talked about going to business school. This could be your chance." But Eloise and Mr. Washington remained silent, their expressions troubled as they exchanged knowing glances. What Marcus asked, catching their look. "You both have something to say. Let's hear it." Mr. Washington, a tall man in his 60s with gray threading through his close-cropped hair, leaned forward. "I've seen white saviors come through Pinewood Gardens my entire life, Marcus. They arrive with big smiles and bigger promises, but there's always a catch." He tapped the agreement with one finger. "Always." Eloise nodded. "My grandmother used to say, when the fox offers to guard the hen house, the chickens better start running." Marcus understood their skepticism. His own excitement about the scholarship had been tempered by the Carmichaels' condescending attitudes and that troubling conversation about Pinewood acquisitions. "Miss Matter in a Pizzo. Jackson might know something," Eloise suggested. "She's lived here longer than any of us." MissWachin10.com. Jackson was the neighborhood matriarch, a 90-year-old former teacher who had documented Pinewood Gardens' history for decades. When they brought the question to her small house later that afternoon, she received them in her crowded living room walls, covered with historical photographs and news clippings about the neighborhood. "Carmichael," she repeated, adjusting her glasses. "That name does ring a bell." She shuffled to an old filing cabinet and began pulling out folders. Here it is. 1987. Gerald Carmichael was just starting out then, making his first millions. She handed Marcus a yellowed newspaper article. The headline read, "Developer Promises Jobs, Delivers Disappointment." The article detailed how a younger Gerald Carmichael had promised construction jobs to Pinewood Gardens residents in exchange for community support for a commercial development. Once approved, the jobs had gone to workers from outside the neighborhood, and the resulting shopping center had priced out local businesses. "History has a way of repeating itself," Miss Jackson said quietly, "especially when we forget to learn from it the first time." Back at home, Marcus pored over the agreement late into the night. The language was dense with legal terminology, but certain clauses stood out as concerning. The scholarship required attendance at a specific university, prohibited transfer to other schools, and included a moral conduct clause, so broadly worded it could be used to terminate the scholarship for almost any reason. Most troubling was the employment clause, which strongly encouraged working for Carmichael Industries after graduation, with the suggestion that declining such employment could be considered a breach of good faith. Marcus's research continued the next day at the public library, where he used the computers to dig deeper into Carmichael Industries' business practices. What he found was a pattern: Carmichael educational initiatives often preceded major development projects. In Atlanta, scholarship programs had been established in neighborhoods that within 5 years had been completely gentrified. In Birmingham, community centers funded by the Carmichael Foundation now stood in areas converted to upscale shopping districts. The library also offered resources on business law and contracts that Marcus studied carefully, marking passages relevant to the agreement he was considering. As he read, a librarian approached his table. "You're looking at contract law?" she asked. When Marcus explained his situation in general terms, she recommended several additional resources, including a book on negotiation tactics. "Knowledge is power," she told him with a smile, "especially when dealing with people who don't expect you to have any." That evening, Marcus received a call from Lawrence Wilson. "The Carmichaels are asking about your decision," the attorney said. "They're eager to proceed with the arrangements." "I'm still considering the offer," Marcus replied. "But I have some questions about Carmichael Industries' interest in Pinewood Gardens." A pause followed before Lawrence spoke again, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm not aware of any specific business interests in your neighborhood, Marcus. The scholarship is a separate matter entirely." But something in his tone made Marcus doubt the statement. The next day brought another unexpected development. Through Shanice, Marcus arranged a meeting with Andre Phillips, a former Carmichael Foundation scholarship recipient, now working as a mid-level manager at Carmichael Industries. They met at a coffee shop downtown, well away from both Pinewood Gardens and the foundation offices. Andre was impeccably dressed in a designer suit, his demeanor polished and professional, but as he spoke about his experience, Marcus noticed a certain emptiness in his expressions. "The scholarship changed my life," Andre acknowledged. "I grew up in West Side, not too different from Pinewood Gardens. Now I have a corner office and a house in the suburbs." "Sounds like success," Marcus observed. Andre's laugh held little humor. "By some definitions, sure. I haven't seen my family in 3 years. My mother still lives in West Side, but the neighborhood has changed so much I barely recognize it. Half the homes were bought by developers and converted to upscale apartments. My mother's building is next." He stirred his coffee absently. "The foundation doesn't just give scholarships, Marcus. They remove promising young people from their communities, groom them to fit into corporate culture, and then use their success stories to justify revitalizing the very neighborhoods they came from." The conversation left Marcus deeply troubled. That night, the Carmichaels' persistence manifested in a different form. A delivery truck arrived at their house bearing gifts. A new television for Eloise, a laptop computer for Marcus, and a note expressing the Carmichaels' continued interest in investing in Marcus's future. Bribes, Eloise stated flatly, refusing to even unbox the television. "When people can't buy your agreement, they try to buy your conscience." The pressure continued in other ways. Gerald Carmichael began calling daily, his initial friendliness gradually giving way to impatience. Margaret sent elaborate fruit baskets and offers to have Eloise's house refreshed with new furniture and appliances. Lawrence Wilson maintained a more balanced approach, acknowledging Marcus's concerns while gently emphasizing the opportunity's value. The community itself seemed divided on what Marcus should do. Some neighbors encouraged him to take the scholarship and escape Pinewood Gardens, arguing that one person couldn't fight wealthy developers anyway. Others, like Miss Jackson and Mr. Stay, Washington cautioned that accepting the Carmichaels' offer might unwittingly make him complicit in their plans for the neighborhood. Even the local pastor offered conflicting advice during Sunday service. "God opens doors of opportunity," he preached, "but not every open door leads to where we think it does. Discernment is key." That night, Marcus dreamed of 2 different futures. In one, he wore an expensive suit, worked in a gleaming office, and drove a luxury car, but looked back at Pinewood Gardens, now transformed into upscale condominiums, where none of his family or neighbors remained. In the other, he stayed in Pinewood Gardens, completed community college slowly while working at Southern Comfort, watching opportunities pass him by. Neither future felt right. "There has to be another way," he told his grandmother over breakfast the next morning. "Something between rejecting education and selling out our community." Eloise studied him thoughtfully. "You know, your grandfather used to say that when someone offers you a deal you can't accept but can't refuse, it's time to make a counteroffer." The idea took root as Marcus prepared for another meeting with the Carmichaels. This time he wouldn't just be responding to their proposal. He would bring one of his own. The days before the meeting passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus spent every free moment researching business negotiations, studying successful community development models, and drafting his counterproposal. The community center's ancient computer became his base of operations, with Mr. Washington staying late to give him access after normal hours. When not researching, Marcus practiced his presentation first with Eloise, then with Deshawn and Shanice, refining his arguments and anticipating objections. On the morning of the meeting, Marcus dressed in his best clothes, pressed slacks a button-down shirt borrowed from Deshawn, who worked at a bank, and shoes polished to a military shine. This time, he wasn't going to the Carmichael Foundation alone. Eloise wore her church dress, and Mr. Washington accompanied them, bringing decades of community advocacy experience and the gravitas of his position. They arrived at the Carmichael Foundation building precisely at 10 o'clock. The receptionist's expression shifted noticeably when she recognized Marcus, her professional demeanor instantly warming. "Mr. Taylor, good morning. The Carmichaels are expecting you. Would you like coffee or water while you wait?" The transformation was striking evidence that Marcus was no longer viewed as an interloper, but as someone connected to the Carmichaels. The security guards who had watched him so closely on his first visit now nodded respectfully as Lawrence Wilson emerged from the elevator to greet them. "Marcus, Mrs. Taylor, and Mr. Washington. I presume Gerald mentioned you might bring an advisor. Please come this way." In the elevator, Lawrence spoke quietly to Marcus. "The Carmichaels are quite eager to finalize arrangements today. They've prepared all the necessary paperwork for your signature." Marcus nodded but said nothing, clutching the folder containing his own documents more tightly. The boardroom looked exactly as it had during their first visit, with Gerald and Margaret Carmichael seated at the far end of the long table. This time, however, several other people were present. A man Gerald introduced as their financial advisor, a woman identified as the Foundation's public relations director, and a stern-looking man described simply as legal counsel. Marcus Gerald greeted him with a broad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm pleased you've come to a decision, and you've brought reinforcements, I see." His gaze passed dismissively over Eloise and Mr. Washington. "Mrs. Taylor, lovely to see you again." "And you are," he added, turning to Mr. Washington with a slightly raised eyebrow. "Robert Washington," Mr. Washington replied evenly. "Director of the Pinewood Gardens Community Center for 27 years, and before that, civil rights attorney for the Southern Justice Coalition." Gerald's expression flickered slightly at this information. "Well, we're pleased to have you all here. Shall we get started? I have a rather tight schedule today." He gestured to the papers spread before him. "We've prepared the final scholarship agreement, along with arrangements for Mrs. Taylor's relocation to Shady Pines Senior Living Community, a very exclusive facility near the university." Marcus took his seat directly across from Gerald, placing his own folder on the table. "Before we discuss your proposal further, Mr. Carmichael, I'd like to present an alternative for your consideration." Gerald's smile froze. "Alternative, Marcus? We've already outlined an extremely generous offer." "Yes, you have," Marcus acknowledged, "and I appreciate it. But I believe there's a way for this opportunity to benefit not just me, but the entire Pinewood Gardens community." He opened his folder and began distributing copies of his proposal to everyone present. Gerald accepted his copy with visible reluctance, glancing at it briefly before setting it aside. "Marcus, I understand your community spirit, but the Foundation's scholarship program focuses on individual achievement. We identify promising candidates and help them reach their potential. By removing them from their communities," Marcus responded, keeping his voice level. "I've spoken with Andre Phillips and several other scholarship recipients. The pattern is clear. You select young people from economically disadvantaged areas, move them away from their communities, and then Carmichael Industries acquires property in those same neighborhoods for development projects." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The PR director began typing rapidly on her tablet, while the legal counsel leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "That's a serious mischaracterization of our business practices," Gerald said coldly. "Carmichael Industries and the Carmichael Foundation are separate entities with separate missions, yet they share the same leadership and often work in the same communities," Mr. Washington pointed out. "The pattern is difficult to ignore." Marcus continued before Gerald could respond. My counter-proposal is straightforward. I would accept the scholarship with the condition that the foundation also invest in Pinewood Gardens itself. Specifically, funding for community development initiatives designed and led by residents. Margaret Carmichael, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. That's not how our scholarship program works, Marcus. We select individuals with potential, not communities. But imagine the potential of an entire neighborhood, Marcus countered. Pinewood Gardens doesn't lack talent or ambition. It lacks resources and opportunity. He outlined his vision: a community business incubator, educational programs at the community center, infrastructure improvements, and microloan programs for local entrepreneurs. The total cost would be significant, but still less than the value of the properties Carmichael Industries appeared interested in acquiring. Gerald's face darkened as Marcus spoke. "Young man, I don't think you understand how philanthropy works. We decide where our charitable dollars go, not the recipients." "And that's exactly the problem," Eloise interjected. "You see charity as something you control, not as true investment in people's dignity and self-determination." Gerald turned to her with barely concealed anger. "Mrs. Taylor, with all due respect, you have no idea how much good our foundation has done. We've provided opportunities to hundreds of young people who would otherwise have had none, while simultaneously facilitating the displacement of thousands more," Mr. Washington added calmly. A fact well documented in public records. The meeting was rapidly deteriorating, with Gerald growing more visibly frustrated and his team exchanging concerned glances. Marcus realized he needed to de-escalate before the door closed completely. "Mr. Carmichael, I'm not rejecting your offer outright. I'm proposing a partnership that would create a genuine success story for both the foundation and Pinewood Gardens." Gerald stood abruptly. "I've heard enough. Our offer was more than generous, and you've responded with accusations and demands. Perhaps I misjudged your character, Marcus. A truly grateful person would have accepted this opportunity without trying to rewrite the terms." Marcus remained seated, maintaining his composure despite the insult. "Gratitude doesn't require submission, Mr. Carmichael, and character includes standing up for one's community, not just oneself." Gerald. Margaret began placing a hand on her husband's arm. "Perhaps we should consider." "No," he cut her off sharply. "I won't be dictated to by a line cook with delusions of grandeur. The offer is withdrawn." He turned to his team. "We're done here." As Gerald and most of his team filed out of the room, Marcus felt a complex mixture of disappointment and relief. The scholarship would have changed his life, but not on terms he could accept with integrity. What surprised him was that Lawrence Wilson remained seated, watching him with an unreadable expression. More surprising still was that Margaret Carmichael also stayed behind, looking troubled. Marcus, Lawrence said quietly when the others had gone, that was either very brave or very foolish, possibly both. Marcus began gathering his papers, preparing to leave. "I couldn't accept terms that might harm my neighborhood, Mr. Wilson, no matter how beneficial they might be to me personally." Margaret Carmichael sighed deeply. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago, Marcus. Someone who also refused to compromise his principles, even when it would have been easier." She glanced toward the door through which her husband had exited. "Lawrence, would you be kind enough to show Mr. Washington and Mrs. Taylor to the reception area? I'd like a moment alone with Marcus." When the others had left, Margaret moved to sit closer to Marcus. "My husband wasn't always as you see him now," she said softly. "When we were younger, he genuinely wanted to help communities like yours. Somewhere along the way, helping became controlling and success became measured in dollars rather than lives improved." Marcus listened silently, unsure where this conversation was leading. "What would you say," Margaret continued, "if I told you Lawrence wasn't just our attorney? What if he had a personal connection to Pinewood Gardens? What do you think Margaret is about to reveal? Is Lawrence Wilson secretly connected to Pinewood Gardens in a way that could change everything?" Comment number 1. If you think Lawrence might be a former resident with divided loyalties. Or number 2, if you believe he might be working against the Carmichaels from the inside. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're on the edge of your seat. Do you believe Marcus made the right choice standing up to the Carmichaels, or should he have accepted the scholarship to secure his own future? The real test of 8-4. Character isn't just in making sacrifices, but in knowing which principles are worth sacrificing for. Marcus stared at Margaret Carmichael, processing her cryptic question about Lawrence Wilson's connection to Pinewood Gardens. Before he could respond, the boardroom door opened, and Lawrence himself returned, closing it firmly behind him. "Mrs. Carmichael," he said, his voice tight with concern, "I'm not sure this is wise." Margaret waved away his objection. "Gerald has made his decision, Lawrence. I'm making mine." She turned back to Marcus. "My husband doesn't know this, but Lawrence grew up in Pinewood Gardens. 50 years ago, it was his home." Lawrence's professional demeanor slipped for a moment, revealing discomfort and something that looked almost like shame. "It's true," he admitted, taking a seat across from Marcus. "My family lived on Maple Street until I was 18. My father worked at the steel mill, my mother cleaned houses in the wealthy neighborhoods." Marcus was stunned. "You're from Pinewood Gardens. Then how did you end up working for someone like Gerald Carmichael?" Lawrence loosened his tie slightly, the first crack in his impeccable presentation. "I received a scholarship similar to what was offered to you, though much smaller and from a different foundation. I went to law school, worked hard, built a reputation. Gerald hired me 20 years ago because he wanted a black attorney who understood the communities he was interested in. He wanted someone who could help him exploit those communities," Marcus realized aloud. Lawrence didn't deny it. "Initially, I told myself I was helping bridge two worlds, that I could influence decisions from the inside. Over time, that justification became harder to maintain." He looked directly at Marcus. "Your counter-proposal today reminded me of arguments I stopped making years ago." Margaret folded her hands on the table. "What Marcus doesn't know, Lawrence, is that you've been documenting Gerald's business practices for the past 5 years." She turned to Marcus. "Lawrence has been gathering evidence of discriminatory lending, predatory acquisition tactics, and misuse of foundation funds." Marcus looked between them, trying to make sense of this new information. "You've been working against your own client. Isn't that illegal for an attorney?" "Not exactly against," Lawrence clarified. "I've simply been keeping meticulous records of decisions and practices that skirt ethical and sometimes legal boundaries. My duty as an attorney is complex. I can't disclose privileged information, but I can document patterns that might eventually require accountability." Margaret's expression was both sad and determined. "Gerald and I have been growing apart for years. His business practices are only part of the reason. I've stayed because I hope to moderate his worst impulses, but that strategy has failed." She reached for her handbag and removed a business card, sliding it across the table to Marcus. "This is my personal contact information. I'd like to help you develop your counterproposal into something more formal, something with legal weight." Marcus accepted the card cautiously. "Why would you do this? You'd be working against your husband's interests." "I would be working for what the Carmichael Foundation was originally created to do," she corrected him. "And perhaps helping Gerald remember the man he once was, though I admit that may be wishful thinking." Lawrence leaned forward. "Marcus, if you're serious about your community development plan, I can help. But you need to understand the risks. Gerald Carmichael is a powerful man with influential connections. Standing against him will have consequences." "More serious than losing the scholarship?" Marcus asked. Lawrence nodded gravely. "Much more serious. Jobs can disappear. Loans can be called in. Inspectors can suddenly find code violations in buildings that have stood for decades. I've seen it happen." Despite the warning, Marcus felt a surge of determination. "If you're willing to help, I want to move forward. Pinewood Gardens deserves better than being carved up for development profits." The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Marcus gathered community members at the Pinewood Gardens Community Center to refine his proposal. Residents of all ages contributed ideas: senior programs, youth entrepreneurship, training infrastructure, improvements, and housing preservation strategies. Mr. Washington used his connections to identify potential funding sources beyond the Carmichael Foundation, including government grants and other private foundations. Lawrence provided legal guidance, helping translate community wishes into legally sound proposals. He also shared insider knowledge about Carmichael Industries' apparent interest in Pinewood Gardens. They've been quietly purchasing properties through shell companies, he explained during an evening meeting at Marcus's home. The plan appears to be accumulating enough land to justify a rezoning request for commercial development. As they researched further, Marcus discovered troubling tax irregularities in the Carmichael Foundation's filings. Public records showed scholarships announced but never awarded, community centers funded but never built, and significant discrepancies between reported charitable activities and actual expenditures. This could be important leverage, Lawrence acknowledged when Marcus presented his findings. But proceeding with this information would cross a line from negotiation to confrontation. Marcus understood the implications. Using such information might help Pinewood Gardens, but would make Gerald Carmichael a determined enemy. During this intensive planning period, Marcus was surprised to learn from Shanice that the Carmichaels had approached her 2 months before his own encounter with them. "They offered me a nursing scholarship," she revealed as they walked home from work one evening. "But something felt off about it. They wanted me to move to a different city, cut ties with my family here. I said no." "You never mentioned it," Marcus said, surprised that she'd kept such an offer secret. Shanice shrugged. "What was there to tell? Rich white people wanting to play savior isn't exactly news. Besides, I've seen what happens to neighborhoods like ours when developers start getting interested." Her revelation made Marcus wonder how many other young people from Pinewood Gardens had been approached, how many had accepted offers and been removed from the community, whether by the Carmichaels or others like them. The community's support for Marcus's stand against exploitation grew as word spread about his counterproposal. Elderly residents shared stories of previous battles against developers. Young people offered technical skills designing websites and social media campaigns to showcase Pinewood Gardens' strengths and potential. Local business owners committed to mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs. Even Marcus's boss at Southern Comfort, Mr. Peterson, surprised him by offering the restaurant as a meeting space after hours. "This neighborhood has kept my business afloat for 30 years, he admitted. "Maybe it's time I gave something back." As community momentum built, so did outside interest. A reporter from the Montgomery Advocate contacted Marcus after hearing about the confrontation with the Carmichaels. "We've been investigating gentrification patterns across the city," she explained. "Your story could be an important piece of that larger narrative." Marcus was considering the interview request when a more ominous development occurred. A large envelope was delivered to his home containing no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message: "Accept the original offer or face consequences. This is your only warning." Marcus showed the letter to Lawrence, who examined it carefully. "This is concerning but not surprising," he said. "Gerald feels challenged, and he doesn't respond well to challenges." "What should I do?" Marcus asked. "Continue exactly as you are," Lawrence advised. "But document everything. Save emails, record phone calls, where legal, keep a detailed journal of all interactions. If this escalates to intimidation or harassment, we'll need evidence." Margaret Carmichael continued, providing support, though always discreetly. She arranged meetings with other foundation board members who might be sympathetic to Marcus's community-focused approach. She shared insights about which arguments might persuade specific decision-makers. And she warned when Gerald seemed particularly agitated about the situation. "He mentioned Pinewood Gardens at dinner last night," she reported during one clandestine meeting. "He said something about teaching that ungrateful cook a lesson." "Be careful, Marcus." As the community plan took shape, Marcus began to see a path forward that didn't require the Carmichaels' approval at all. With Lawrence's legal expertise, Mr. Washington's community organizing skills, and the growing coalition of Pinewood Gardens supporters, alternative funding sources emerged. A coalition of smaller foundations expressed interest in supporting aspects of the plan. A state economic development initiative offered matching grants for community revitalization. Even some of Carmichael Industries' business competitors saw potential value in positive publicity from supporting Pinewood Gardens. Late one evening, as Marcus was updating the proposal at the community center, Lawrence arrived looking troubled. "There's something you should know," he said after ensuring they were alone. "I've been maintaining 2 sets of files on Carmichael Industries for years. One contains the official records of my work as their attorney. The other documents, patterns of behavior that concern me professionally and ethically." He placed a flash drive on the table. "This contains information that could significantly impact Gerald's reputation and business operations. I've been gathering it as insurance, hoping never to use it." Marcus looked at the small device. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Gerald isn't just planning to ignore your proposal anymore," Lawrence said grimly. "He's actively working to undermine it, and you personally. And I need to decide where my true loyalties lie." The first sign of trouble came unexpectedly on a Tuesday morning. Eloise received a letter stating that her medical insurance had been canceled due to administrative errors. When she called the insurance company, a confused representative could find no reason for the cancellation, but explained that reinstatement would take at least 30 days. "This isn't a coincidence," Marcus told Lawrence when they spoke that evening. "Grandma's had the same insurance for 15 years without a problem." Lawrence agreed. "Gerald has connections throughout the business community. This bears his fingerprints, though it would be nearly impossible to prove." The situation worsened 2 days later when Marcus arrived at Southern Comfort for his shift and found Ronald Kessler waiting for him at the employee entrance. "Taylor," Ronald said, not meeting his eyes, "I need to see you in the office." Inside the small manager's office, Ronald handed Marcus a termination notice. "We're letting you go effective immediately." When Marcus asked why, Ronald gestured vaguely at the paper. "It's all there. Violation of food safety protocols, excessive tardiness, inappropriate workplace conduct, all false accusations. This is wrong, and you know it," Marcus said quietly. "Who pressured you to do this, Ronald?" The manager's face flushed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "This is a business decision." But his discomfort was evident, and as Marcus left the restaurant for the last time, Shanice followed him outside. "Peterson got a call yesterday from one of our biggest suppliers," she whispered. "They threatened to cancel their contract if you weren't fired. Said something about protecting their relationship with more valuable business partners." The pattern continued. The Pinewood Gardens Community Center suddenly faced closure due to previously unnoticed code violations that would cost thousands to address. The community garden was vandalized, overnight plants uprooted, and soil contaminated with motor oil. Several residents who had publicly supported Marcus's initiative reported strange problems, car trouble, banking issues, unexpected tax audits. "He's sending a message," Lawrence explained during an emergency meeting at Eloise's house. "This is how Gerald operates when challenged. He rarely does anything directly illegal, but he leverages his influence to make life difficult for opponents." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility for what was happening to his community. "Maybe I should back down, accept the original scholarship, and stop causing trouble." "No," Eloise said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants you to think, that standing up for what's right is causing trouble. Your grandfather would say that trouble is sometimes necessary when fighting injustice." Despite the pressure tactics, the Pinewood Gardens community responded with remarkable resilience and solidarity. When Marcus lost his job, 3 local businesses offered him temporary positions. When Eloise's medication became unaffordable without insurance, neighbors pooled resources to help purchase it. When the community center faced closure, residents with construction skills volunteered to address the code violations, while others organized fundraisers to cover material costs. The local civil rights organization, alerted by Mr. Toole, Washington assigned an attorney to investigate the pattern of harassment. "What we're seeing here is a textbook case of community intimidation," the attorney explained. "It's unfortunately common when developers target predominantly black neighborhoods for acquisition." While the community mobilized, Marcus continued refining the development proposal with Lawrence's guidance. They worked on creating legal structures to protect community assets, establishing a land trust that could prevent property speculation, and developing workforce training programs to ensure economic benefits remained within Pinewood Gardens. Marcus's research expanded beyond Montgomery, identifying similar cases across the country where communities had successfully resisted predatory development. He connected with organizers in Atlanta, Detroit, and Oakland who shared strategies and warnings. Document everything was the consistent advice. And make the story public. Sunlight is the best disinfectant for these situations. The media interest that had begun with the Montgomery Advocate grew as the story spread online. A video interview with Marcus, recorded at the community center and posted to social media, garnered thousands of views and drew attention from larger news outlets. Black community stands against millionaire developers' tactics read one headline. Scholarship offer masks gentrification attempt, declared another. The publicity created both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, it brought valuable attention to Pinewood Gardens' struggle and attracted potential allies and resources. On the other, it escalated tensions with Gerald Carmichael, who was unused to public scrutiny of his business practices. Lawrence reported that Gerald was apoplectic about the media coverage and had instructed his legal team to explore defamation claims. As pressure mounted, Marcus experienced moments of doubt and fear. Late one night, unable to sleep, he sat on the porch steps of his grandmother's house, wondering if he'd taken on more than he could handle. Deshawn found him there and sat beside him in silence for several minutes. "You know what my dad always says," Deshawn finally spoke. "He says scared and brave feel exactly the same in your body. The only difference is what you do next." Marcus nodded, grateful for the simple wisdom. "I'm definitely feeling both right now." "We all are," Deshawn acknowledged. "But we're with you, man. All of us." The next morning brought a new development. Margaret Carmichael requested a private meeting with Marcus at a small cafe far from both Pinewood Gardens and the Carmichael Foundation offices. Lawrence advised caution but didn't object when Marcus decided to go. "Gerald is preparing to make a major move against your initiative," Margaret informed him without preamble when they met. "He's scheduled a press conference for next week to announce a new development project that would essentially erase Pinewood Gardens. He secured preliminary approval from 2 city council members and has options on enough properties to proceed regardless of community opposition." Marcus absorbed this news grimly. "Can it be stopped?" Margaret hesitated. "Perhaps. I've been speaking with other board members about Gerald's methods. Some are uncomfortable with the direction the foundation has taken. With the right approach, you might find allies where you least expect them." She slid an envelope across the table. "This contains information about the press conference and the names of those board members most likely to be sympathetic to your cause. Use it wisely." When Marcus shared this information with Lawrence and the core group of community advocates, they began planning a countermove. "If Gerald wants to make a public announcement, Mr. Washington suggested we should be there with our own announcement." The final days before the press conference were a flurry of activity. Marcus worked with Lawrence to prepare a comprehensive presentation of the community development plan. Mr. Washington mobilized community members to attend in support. Media contacts were alerted about the competing visions for Pinewood Gardens that would be presented. The day before the event, Marcus made a final attempt to access the Carmichael Foundation building to deliver their proposal directly. He arrived at the impressive glass structure to find new security protocols in place. "I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor," the receptionist said without sounding sorry at all, "but you've been placed on the restricted access list. I can't allow you entry without prior authorization." It was a petty move, but not an unexpected one. "Please inform Mr. Carmichael that I'll see him tomorrow at the press conference," Marcus told her before leaving. That evening, the core group gathered at Eloise's house for final preparations. The atmosphere was tense but determined as they reviewed their strategy one last time. Remember, Lawrence cautioned tomorrow isn't just about confronting Gerald Carmichael. It's about presenting a positive vision for Pinewood Gardens' future. Focus on what you're building, not just what you're opposing. As the meeting concluded, Marcus stepped onto the porch for a moment of quiet reflection. The neighborhood streets were peaceful in the evening light. Children playing in yards, elderly residents chatting on porches, the everyday life of a community fighting for its survival. He thought about how far they'd come since that rainy night when he'd given his dinner to 2 seemingly stranded elderly people. Whatever happened tomorrow would set the course for Pinewood Gardens' future and his own. He was as ready as he could be. The morning of the press conference dawned clear and bright sunlight, illuminating the Montgomery City Hall steps, where Gerald Carmichael had chosen to make his announcement. By 9 o'clock, the area was already filling with reporters, business representatives, and curious onlookers. Behind the podium, a large display covered by a cloth concealed what was presumably an architectural rendering of the proposed development. Gerald Carmichael stood to one side, surrounded by associates in expensive suits, looking confident and entirely in his element. What he hadn't expected was the organized presence of Pinewood Gardens residents. They arrived methodically in groups of 5 and 10, positioning themselves strategically throughout the crowd, many wearing T-shirts reading "Pinewood Gardens, Our Home, Our Future," that Shanice had designed and the community had produced overnight. Marcus, Lawrence, Eloise, and Mr. Washington arrived last, taking positions directly across from the podium. Gerald's expression hardened momentarily when he spotted them before resuming his public smile. At precisely 10 o'clock, Gerald approached the microphone, flanked by 2 city council members and his corporate team. "Good morning," he began, his voice projecting practiced warmth. "Today, Carmichael Industries is proud to announce an exciting new development that will transform a struggling area of Montgomery into a vibrant modern district, bringing jobs and economic growth to our city." As he continued outlining the proposal, Marcus and Lawrence exchanged glances. The plan was exactly what they had feared: luxury condominiums, upscale retail spaces, and corporate offices that would completely replace the existing Pinewood Gardens community. Gerald described it as urban renewal and economic revitalization, carefully avoiding terms like displacement or gentrification. When he unveiled the architectural rendering, gasps rippled through the crowd. The familiar streets and homes of Pinewood Gardens were nowhere to be seen, replaced by gleaming high-rises and manicured plazas that bore no resemblance to the existing neighborhood. "We expect to break ground within 6 months," Gerald announced, confidently pending final approvals, which we anticipate will proceed smoothly. As Gerald prepared to take questions, Marcus stepped forward. One of the reporters recognized him from previous interviews and called out, "Mr. Taylor, do you have a response to this announcement?" All eyes turned to Marcus as he moved to the edge of the gathered press. "Yes, I do," he said clearly. "The residents of Pinewood Gardens have a different vision for our community's future, one that preserves our history and culture while creating genuine economic opportunities for those who already live there." Gerald's smile tightened. "Mr. Taylor is entitled to his opinion, of course. However, Carmichael Industries has already secured the necessary property options and preliminary approvals for this project." "Actually," Lawrence interjected, stepping up beside Marcus, "those approvals were obtained without proper community input, a violation of City Ordinance 56-12 regarding developments in historically significant neighborhoods." A ripple of surprise moved through the assembled media. "And who might you be?" Gerald asked coldly. "Lawrence Wilson," Attorney Lawrence replied, then added with significant emphasis, "currently representing the Pinewood Gardens Community Coalition." The shock on Gerald's face was unmistakable. Before he could respond, an unexpected voice called from the back of the crowd, "I'd like to hear what Mr. Taylor has to propose." All heads turned to see a woman in a formal business suit making her way forward. "Janice Reynolds, Deputy Attorney General's office," she announced, showing credentials to the suddenly attentive reporters. "Our office has received concerning information about the approval process for this development." The press conference was rapidly slipping out of Gerald's control. Camera crews swung away from him toward Marcus Lawrence and the surprised state representative. Marcus seized the moment, outlining the community-developed plan for Pinewood Gardens renovation of existing housing, small business incubation programs, workforce development initiatives, and infrastructure improvements that would preserve the neighborhood's character while improving quality of life. "This isn't about stopping development," Marcus emphasized. "It's about ensuring that development benefits the existing community rather than displacing it." The contrast between the two visions was stark, and the reporters' questions reflected growing skepticism about Gerald's approach. The arrival of the Attorney General's representative had changed the dynamic, entirely lending credibility to Marcus's counterproposal and raising questions about Carmichael Industries' methods. As the questioning intensified, Gerald attempted to regain control, stepping back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, while Mr. Taylor's idealism is admirable, The reality is that Carmichael Industries has the resources and expertise to implement our vision. With all due respect, a community group led by a former line cook lacks both. A new voice cut through the murmurs that followed. I wouldn't be so certain about that, Gerald. Margaret Carmichael walked slowly up the steps, her elegant appearance drawing all eyes. Gerald stared at his wife in disbelief. Margaret, what are you doing here? The right thing, finally, she replied, then turned to address the crowd. For too long, the Carmichael Foundation has drifted from its original mission of genuinely helping communities in need. Instead, it has become a tool for identifying neighborhoods ripe for commercial exploitation. Gasps and hurried photographing followed this extraordinary statement. Margaret continued, I am here to announce that as a Foundation board member and major shareholder in Carmichael Industries, I am formally opposing this development plan and supporting the community-led initiative presented by Mr. Plon, Taylor. The press conference descended into chaos as reporters shouted questions and Gerald attempted to pull Margaret aside for a private conversation. The Deputy Attorney General used the moment to approach Marcus and Lawrence. We've been reviewing the documentation you submitted, she said quietly. There appear to be significant irregularities in how this development was approved. Our office will be launching a formal investigation. Lawrence nodded. I've been documenting these practices for years. Whatever additional information you need, I can provide. As the impromptu press conference continued, Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm, answering questions about the community plan, with the confidence that came from weeks of preparation and a lifetime of caring about his neighborhood. 2 years later, Marcus stood at the entrance of the newly renovated Pinewood Gardens Community Center. The building had been expanded and modernized, now housing not only community gathering spaces, but also small business offices, a technology lab, and classrooms for educational programs. Above the entrance, a new sign read Eloise Taylor Community Development Center, named in honor of his grandmother who had passed away 6 months earlier. The investigation into Carmichael Industries had revealed widespread improprieties, resulting in Gerald Carmichael facing multiple civil penalties and the restructuring of both his company and foundation. Lawrence Wilson had established his own foundation dedicated to providing legal support to communities facing similar development pressures. And Marcus, now 20 years old and enrolled in business courses at the local university, served as director of the Pinewood Gardens Business Cooperative, helping residents start and grow their own enterprises. The scholarship that had once been offered exclusively to him had been transformed into a community-wide educational fund, supporting dozens of Pinewood Gardens residents pursuing higher education without having to leave their primates. Neighborhood. Shanice was among the first recipients, now completing her nursing degree, while working part-time at the neighborhood health clinic, established through the Community Development Plan. As Marcus surveyed the activity around the center, he reflected on how differently things might have turned out had he simply accepted Gerald's original offer. He would likely be finishing his degree at an expensive university, perhaps preparing for a corporate job while Pinewood Gardens disappeared, building by building. Instead, the neighborhood was thriving. The senior advocacy program, initially championed by his grandmother, now provided support to elderly residents throughout Montgomery. The Youth Entrepreneurship Program had launched 15 small businesses in its first year. Property values had increased moderately, but strong tenant protections and community-owned housing ensured that longtime residents weren't priced out. The most surprising outcome had been Margaret Carmichael's decision. After the public confrontation and subsequent investigation, she had divorced Gerald and redirected a substantial portion of her personal fortune to support the Pinewood Gardens initiative and similar projects in other cities. Her quiet mentorship had been invaluable as Marcus navigated the complex world of community development and nonprofit management. Thinking about your grandmother, a voice asked, interrupting Marcus's reflections. He turned to find Deshawn approaching, now a program coordinator at the center. Among other things, Marcus admitted, "Just amazed at how much has changed since that night I gave away my dinner." Deshawn nodded. One action man. That's all it took to start everything. Inside the center, a new group of residents was gathering for the weekly business incubator program. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped inside to welcome them, continuing the cycle of community support and empowerment that had emerged from his simple act of kindness 2 years before. As he looked at the eager faces before him, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose. The price of his kindness had been high, demanding courage, perseverance, and the willingness to stand against powerful opposition. But the rewards shared by an entire community had proven immeasurably greater than any individual success could have been. What do you think about Marcus's journey from a simple act of kindness to becoming a community leader? Would you have made the same choices he did, or would you have taken the individual opportunity? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story about standing up for what's right and fighting for your community inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Remember, sometimes the greatest rewards come not from what we gain individually, but from what we help others achieve together. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to make a difference in your own community, one act of kindness at a time. This story reminds us that true character isn't measured by what we accept, but by what we're willing to sacrifice for our principles. Marcus could have chosen personal advancement at the expense of his community, but instead recognized that genuine progress must lift everyone, not just select individuals. His journey teaches us that systems of oppression often work by separating promising individuals from their communities, creating success stories that mask the exploitation of those left behind. The Carmichaels' generosity wasn't about helping Marcus, but about using him to facilitate neighborhood gentrification, a pattern repeated in Black communities across America. We learned that resistance requires solidarity. When Marcus faced retaliation, the community's collective response demonstrated that united people hold power even against wealthy adversaries. Margaret and Lawrence's characters show us that those within oppressive systems can choose to become allies when confronted with injustice. Perhaps most importantly, this story challenges the narrative that marginalized communities need saviors from outside. The residents of Pinewood Gardens didn't need the Carmichaels to rescue them. They needed resources, opportunities, and the removal of systemic barriers. Real change came not from individual charity, but from community empowerment and self-determination. True justice isn't about lifting one person up while leaving others behind. It's about transforming the conditions that create inequality in the first place. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have taken the scholarship for your own advancement, or stood firm for your community like he did? Comment below with your thoughts on how you've faced similar choices between personal gain and collective well-being. Have you ever witnessed discrimination or exploitation disguised as help or opportunity in your community? Share your experiences and how you responded. Your story might inspire others facing similar challenges. If this tale of courage, integrity, and community solidarity resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories that illuminate the struggles and triumphs of those fighting against injustice. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that one person standing up for what's right can ignite meaningful change. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the price of kindness. May we all find the wisdom to recognize true opportunity from exploitation and the courage to choose integrity, even when it comes at a personal cost. Remember, real change happens when we rise together.